Engagement Advisor for ACFID. And with me, I have a couple of my colleagues. I'll let them all introduce themselves. So Julie, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm the new sector standard and practice lead at ACFID. I only just recently started, so I will be learning almost as much as the attendees today. But very looking forward to work with Marvin and Whitney and Tamara with membership and compliance with the code.
Wonderful. Thanks, Julie. I might pass to Whitney next.
Thanks, Tamara and Julie. I'm Whitney. I'm one of the standards and code advisors. I specifically look after mostly HR and thematic areas, as well as some operational areas in the code. And I will hand over to Marvin.
Thanks, Whitney. Hello, my name is Marvin. So same with Whitney. I'm one of the standards and code advisor. So I assess the specific requirements of the code that relates to finance and governance. So that's me. Handing over back to you, Tamara.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, to start off, I'd just like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal Ngambri peoples, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather here at ACFID. But I would like to extend that respect to any Indigenous peoples present, but also to the traditional custodians of the lands of anywhere that we're gathering from today. So to kick off, we have a few things that we'll cover in our session today. The first thing is kind of a little bit about ACFID and who we are. You might already be familiar with us. You might be partway through your application. You might have done an application in the past with another organisation, but I'll give a bit of a short overview as to who ACFID is and who we all are within the organisation and our membership. I'll cover the membership types and the different benefits that come with each kind of membership with ACFID, as well as I'll chat through the process. So that includes the eligibility criteria, the application form, and the fees. And then I'll touch a little bit on the code self-assessment, but then I'll pass over to my colleagues, Whit and Marv, who will talk in more detail about the code self-assessment process and what that looks like and what's required. From there, we'll also talk through the appraisal and assessment process at the end. So what happens after you've submitted your code self-assessment and your application form. And we'll talk through the timeframes and submission dates. And then we'll hopefully have a chance to answer any questions if you have any at the end. So to get started, I'm not going to read through the whole slide, but just to give a bit of background, ACFID is the peak body for Australian NGOs involved in international development and humanitarian action. So we were founded in 1965, and we currently have 139 full members and 17 affiliates. So I'll talk a little bit more about ACFID members and who they are, but yeah, we really operate as the peak body representing those organisations. So we have a kind of dual function. One is to support the sector, which involves the code of conduct, but also in terms of our learning resources and our lifting up the sector's performance. And the other half is really focused on advocating for and lobbying for policies that would support both our members and the communities that they serve. So a little bit about us. This is our kind of org structure. You can see we've got 3 distinct teams. So like I said, we've got kind of one part of the organisation is really focused on policy and advocacy, and they do a lot of work on working closely with DFAT, working closely with Parliament, and also working with international stakeholders as well to elevate the profile of our members, but also to kind of influence policy relating to international development and humanitarian aid. Then you'll see this middle team, which is where all of us sit, which is the engagement and effectiveness team. So that's really looking at the effectiveness of our members, kind of how we can best support them to do their missions as best as they can, what support we can offer them in terms of learning and professional development, but also things like shared services or or other opportunities to collaborate as a sector. And then we also have our business operations team who work very closely with us in the organisation to support us. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into who we are as a secretariat. It's always nice to know who you're working with and put some faces to names, but also so in future you're able to know who kind of to reach out to, but we'll also provide you with guidance on that once you become members. So these are our members. So like I say, we have 139 full members and 17 affiliate members. I'll talk through a little bit about the difference between those two and what that means. But essentially, you can see we've got quite a large range of organizations. We've got some really kind of prominent international NGOs and right down to very community-driven local NGOs who are based in Australia but support very closely with particular communities or particular thematic areas. So there's a huge range in terms of the organizations that are part of ACFID, and we really see it as kind of an ecosystem of NGOs that we work with. So in terms of the value of ACFID membership, there's really kind of four key areas that we'll talk about. One is improved standards, which is, is done a lot through our code of conduct, but it's also through a lot of our learning opportunities, through our, through a lot of our guidance notes. We've got good practice toolkits and engagement with other international standards as well. We also offer a lot of networking, collaborating, and learning opportunities. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And then again, our influence and advocacy. We do a lot to lift up the sector, both in terms of the members that we work for and the sector more holistically. And then we also offer opportunities for members to kind of receive direct insights from government that comes through us, to receive kind of specialized information that our organization kind of collects and then shares with our members that's helpful for them in working in Australia. So I'll talk through now in terms of the benefits that we offer by different types of memberships. You've heard me say affiliate and full members. So affiliate members are really organizations that don't do international development work directly, but they're things like research institutes, universities. They may be not delivering international development directly, but maybe doing lobbying just in Australia. Those kinds of organizations that aren't eligible for full membership, they can apply for affiliate membership. I don't believe we have anyone on the call today who's looking at affiliate membership, but do give a shout if you are, and I'll tailor a little bit of what I'm talking about specific to that. But full members are kind of the classic ACFID member when you think about membership with us. So that involves compliance with our code of conduct, and it's for organizations that directly do international development work. So the benefits that are available to all members are things like our networking and sector events. In the financial year of 2024 to 2025, we ran 62 events. So we run quite a lot of events throughout the year. These can range from kind of learning opportunities, but things like member briefings with DFAT or heads of mission, who are Australian heads of mission heading out to countries in which our organizations work, will often have direct briefings between the new head of mission and our members. We do things like workshops and conference, and there's a whole range of activities that we offer throughout the year, which accumulates to around 60 events annually. We also offer access to resources and learning opportunities, which includes 11 online courses, 5 resource hubs, and 5 learning toolkits, with more coming soon. We have the option to participate in our communities of practice. We currently have 23 active communities. So that is groups of staff from different organizations that come together to work on particular thematic areas or particular geographic locations. And it's really a resource sharing, but also a best practice or a group that people can kind of share opportunities or challenges they're facing and seek support from across the sector. All members are also represented within our policy and advocacy initiatives across the year. So we do a range of kind of consultations and paper submissions and work with DFAT. And as a whole, our membership is represented through that. All of our members are entitled to attend at the AGM, and they obtain greater visibility to the Australian public, DFAT and Parliament through engaging with us. And they're also able to participate in our public campaigns. In addition to that, our full members have some special rights, including participation in our governance committees, so they can be elected onto our board or onto our code of conduct committee, the development practice committee, things like that. They have voting rights at the AGM. They are required to be code of conduct compliant, but this is also an opportunity for elevated standards and procedures, and we have with us the whole code team on the course. So we do have a dedicated code team, which also, and then our learning team also develops specific resources to support with code of conduct compliance. In addition to that, being recognized as compliant with the code of conduct offers you enhanced credibility and alignment with leading global standards. You're able to display our logos and code of conduct statements on your website. And you are able then to, once you're code of conduct compliant for 2 years, you're able to apply for the Australian NGO Cooperation Program, which is, ANCP, the funding that goes from DFAT specifically to ACFID members. We can answer more questions about that at the end if you have specific questions around that, but this is just kind of an overview of the different benefits that are offered to ACFID members. So you've decided you want to apply for ACFID membership. There's 2 different paths. So like I say, there's the affiliate path, which is really only for organisations that are not eligible for full membership. But you can see a bit of a breakdown on what the criteria are here. For full membership, you must be Australian, you must be voluntary, you must be not-for-profit, and you must conduct fields in cooperation. You must conduct activities in the fields of cooperation in international relief and development. So realistically, what we're looking for is that you have an Australian legal presence, you are an Australian legal entity, you're registered with ACNC. There's a few different mechanisms we use to check that. You're voluntary, and by this we don't mean that your staff need to be voluntary, but your board of directors must be at least 50% non-executive. So we're looking for 50% of your board are non-executive. You must be not-for-profit, so again registered with ACNC is one of our mechanisms for checking that. And then of course you must be implementing international development overseas. If you don't meet that criteria and you're still wanting to be part of ACFID, then affiliate membership is for you. And you can see that there are still some requirements, though. Under no category is for-profit organisations eligible for ACFID membership. So all of our members, affiliate or full, must be non-for-profit. So this is the process for affiliate applicants. I'm going to skip over it because I believe both the organisations that are on the call today are interested in full membership, but please stop me if that's not the case. But essentially, there's a different process for that. Either way, all of the applications need to go through our application portal. So there's a link there. I will share the slides after this session, but it's fairly easily accessible through the website as well. Otherwise, flick me an email and I'm happy to direct you to the portal. But in terms of the process, this is what it looks like. So the first step is an eligibility check. The second, then you'll pay an application fee, and then you can complete the application form and the code self-assessment. So these parts in blue, these are really the parts that you'll be working on. Then we go to the assessment stage, which is these 2 circles in purple. So the first one is the ACFID assessment, which is our lovely codes team who are on the call. They review the code self-assessment and assess it against our good practice indicators, against our QSA, our quality standards assessment. Sorry, correct me, code team, for that one, but they'll talk through that a bit more in a second. And then we have the remedial action phase, which is once our team have reviewed your application, they'll come back to you with requirements for adjustments or changes depending on the quality of the application. I would, again, the code team will speak to this more, but we're yet to see an application that doesn't need any remedial action. It can be as small as needing to just realign some of the phrasing to make it clear how your standards or how your procedures align with our code of conduct. But it can be that a whole policy is not suitable for what we're looking for. So it really just depends on what has been submitted, but there is almost always remedial action. Once all of the actions have been taken and the application is at the standard that we require for code of conduct compliance, you'll move on to the assessment, which is these little yellow circles here. So the first step is the membership admissions committee approval. The second step is the code of conduct committee approval, and the final step is the board approval. These meetings are typically 2 to 3 weeks apart and they happen quarterly. So the timing of this will just affect when your application is assessed by the organisation and at what point you then become an interim member. Interim members are essentially organisations that have been approved by the board but not yet ratified at our AGM. They have all membership rights aside from the right to vote in the AGM, because at the AGM they are then voted on to become full members and fully ratified by the council. All right. So the eligibility check, this is the very first step in the process. It can be submitted at any time of year and it's a very short form, so it shouldn't take you very long at all. It just needs some basic details about your organization. So things like contact details for whoever is completing the application, contact details for leadership and other nominated contacts, and the types of activities that are undertaken by the organization. So we want to see a brief description of, there's a checklist to tick off what kinds of international development activities you're undertaking, and we just need to see you nominate that you are doing international development activities. We also require that you submit some key documents. So this is business registration or certificate of incorporation, your list of board members, your org chart, your constitution or your governing instrument, your annual report, minutes from your most recent AGM, and ACNC registration certificate, and then independently audited financial statements. So this is important because for our code of conduct, we require independently audited financial statements, and Marvin will speak about that a little bit more. But we recognize that not all organizations at this stage of applying will have independently audited financial statements because they're not required by ACNC when organizations are at a small scale. Let me know if you're looking to apply and you don't currently have independently audited financial statements, and we can chat through what that means and at what stage you'll need to get them independently audited. But essentially, at some point in the application, we'll need to see independently audited financial statements. Then there's an application fee. So once you've submitted all your documents and it's come through to me, I do my assessment to check that you are eligible against our criteria. I will then review, I'll then send you through an invoice for $550 inclusive of GST. This is deducted from your first year of membership fees, but it will be forfeited if the application is withdrawn or if you fail to complete remedial work within an 18 months time frame. So it's really just to support us in the cost that it comes from ACFID in doing your code assessment. As you'll see, there's quite a few staff on the team who are responsible for that. And so throughout the year, it's quite a time-consuming process for us to assess applications. For successful applicants, this is just deducted from your first year of fees. Once you've paid the fee and I've reconciled the invoice, you'll receive the application form. So this is a little bit more detailed than the eligibility form, but it is also a little bit less prescriptive. What we're looking for is descriptions from you about your organization to help us get some background on the kinds of work that you do and the work that you do overseas. We're looking for things, descriptions also about your funding sources, information about where you focus your programs, and some history over the organization as well. And then there's a couple of other documents that we need. So things like a statement of risk, and then also a certificate of completion of two of our e-courses. So there's 2 online courses that must be completed by your CEO and board chair. They're very straightforward. They're quite short courses. They're not, full day activities, but they do just introduce your board, who are ultimately taking on the risk of compliance. It just introduces them to the code of conduct and what that means. So this is what it looks like, and there's a link there, which again will be in the slides when I share with you. But it is a relatively straightforward course. We just need certificates of both your board chair and your CEO completing it. That said, anyone in your organization is welcome to complete it. We encourage as many people who are working on the application or who will be impacted by being signatories to the code of conduct. We encourage them to undertake those courses as well. But what we need to see evidence of is just the CEO and board chair. I'm going to pass over to our codes team now. So I think, Whitney, you're first up, but you can hear a little bit more from them about the code self-assessment and what compliance with the code of conduct looks like.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, and thanks for joining us. So yes, we will have a can I move the slides, or are you moving the slides? I'll move the slides. Okay. Yes, I'll move the slides if you can see them changing. Thank you. So I will talk a little bit about the code of conduct. I'll talk a little bit around the overview, and then I'll talk about some of the thematic areas and give some tips and tricks. And Marvin will focus on tips and tricks around governance and requirements around the financial aspects of the application. So ACFID as a peak body has developed a code, not just by ACFID itself, but with all of our members working together to define what should be a standard in international development and for humanitarian outcomes. And this was done so that we can, increase stakeholder trust and enhance transparency and, accountability and the effectiveness of all ACFID members. So I won't read all of it, but I guess the idea is just so that we all have some base standards that we all agree to when we join ACFID. So I assume that some of you are interested in joining ACFID to ensure that you do meet those standards and can, show that your stakeholders and partners that you are, you adhere to a specific standard of outcomes and delivery. The features of the code is that it's entirely voluntary. So when you decide to join ACFID, you are deciding to say that your organization is going to meet a specific standard. It's owned by the ACFID members. So the ACFID as a whole and the code team, we are kind of custodians of the code, and that's what the Code of Conduct Committee, who I'll talk about a little bit later, kind of do. We can't change the code at all by ourselves. All of these things are done by the members, and if there were any changes proposed, we need to do that at an AGM, and members, full members who have voting rights will then be able to vote whether they want to accept those changes or not accept those changes. So we can, as a team and as an organization, can suggest changes and can give a good background as to why or why not, but we can't actually change the code. It's self-regulatory in that you do have a reporting period. Every year you do need to do some reporting, but we do some desk checks, Marvin and I, but we don't go out and do any spot checks or anything like that at your organization. So it's really, we're just assessing what you tell us about your organization. There is an independent complaints handling mechanism. And again, that's supported by the Code Secretariat, that's us, and the Code of Conduct Committee. Now, it's independent because the Code of Conduct Committee, or otherwise known as the CCC, are completely separate from the board. Every complaint that comes to us, the code team, it's completely confidential from the rest of the ACFID team, and we're quite strict about all of those safety and security features on how we do that. So the only people that know about any complaints will be the CCC and the code team, and that's it. So we always handle them unless, there is a public consequence or outcome. Then we do feature that on the ACFID website and we do talk about that, but that's pretty rare. Most of it is handled not anonymously, but confidentially. And again, all full members, like Tamara says, I'm assuming that most people in the call today are wanting to be full members. So if you are a full member, you must demonstrate your compliance with the code every 3 years. If you're an affiliate member or a university affiliate member, you do not need to do so. But it also means that you cannot use a logo or insinuate in any way that you are compliant with the ACFID Code of Conduct. As mentioned, the Code of Conduct, is continually evolving, and it started back 1997. So it's had a long time and has evolved over the years. There is a formal review every 5 years, and a couple of years ago we did do a formal review. We do a lot of consultations. We ensure that the terminology is up to date. We ensure that the thematic areas are still relevant to the international development sector and humanitarian sector, just to ensure that the code really is reflecting, and I guess, in a way, is a live set of standards and not just static and a point in time. So 2 years ago, the revisions meant that in the code that we've included racial justice as a commitment, locally led commitments, more emphasis on climate change and climate action, as well as participation in the misconduct disclosure scheme if you deploy humanitarian personnel. So the misconduct disclosure scheme, MDS, is a HR to HR kind of program where you can check not just within Australia but across the globe with all different organizations to see if an employee or a potential employee has any disclosable misconduct issues that have happened in their organization before they move on to an organization. And this really helps because, as you all know, formal police checks don't always show you the complete picture because you have to be charged for something for that to turn up on a police check. But, sometimes people move from organization to organization before it becomes, something that you can see on an official police check. So anyway, that is not for all organizations. That is we definitely encourage all organizations to participate if you would like to do that and you have the time and resources to do that. However, it's not mandatory for development organizations. It's only mandatory if you deploy humanitarian personnel, just to, because that's quite, it's a risky kind of activities. I've mentioned the Code of Conduct Committee, otherwise known as the CCC. They are the genuine or true custodians of the Code of Conduct, and the Code Secretariat just supports them and their work. They operate independently. They are responsible for granting and suspending or revoking Code of Conduct status. They have oversight over compliance assessments and investigating complaints. So the CCC works quite closely with us in the code team to do all of that. And the committee is made up of an independent chair, 6 members elected by and from the ACFID members, 1 person appointed from the Australian community and might not have heaps of international development background, and up to 3 specialist-based positions. That's like marketing or fundraising or research. So, there's quite a diversity in the committee, and hopefully, they all bring different types of expertise to ensure that all of our very different and, various committee organizations are well represented in the code. So yeah, if you want to find out more about our current committee, you can jump onto our website and there will be some bios available for your perusal. So how does the code work? It's kind of all split into 3s, which is kind of cool, but don't always know how to reflect that pictorially. So there's one of these pictures and graphs that we kind of use often, but there's 9 quality principles. That's the highest level of standards, and I guess it's just the name of what it does. Then we split them into approaches, so I guess your thematic areas, and then there are processes. That's about your organization internally and how that works and how you do those things. And then systems is also internal, which is about your governance and your people management and how do you ensure that you are doing your job accurately and effectively, with the resources that you have. So that's how it looks like, but I prefer it in this way. This way. So in this format makes a little bit more sense to me, but this format, you'll be able to find it in something called the Quality Assurance Framework, other known as the QAF. And if Marvin, if you don't mind, you can put the link up to that PDF called the QAF. Otherwise, you can also see this format in the Good Practice Toolkit, which is an same thing, just not in PDF. It's just online and it's interactive because it also lists a whole bunch of different resources that you can have a look at, which, you know, you can see it makes sense. The QAF is in a PDF file, so we don't update the resources on that all the time because then we'd have to like print out, you know, a new booklet every time. But online, it is a little bit more live. So welcome to check those both out. And this is the way that I like to explain it is the very first top bit that you'll see in the QAF is the quality principle. That's what we're aspiring to and agreeing to. Then there's a small explanation of the collective values. And then there are your commitments. So there are 9 quality principles and about 131 commitments. So there's a lot. And the commitments is what you, again, are, it's just diving into more details about what it is that we are looking for and why we are agreeing to these standards. And then there it goes down even down a level into compliance indicators. Now, compliance indicators give you an explanation of what does that look like? You know, how would you operationalize your commitment or your quality principle that you've agreed to or the standards that you've agreed to? And then the most important thing as a new applicant organization is your verifiers. Verifiers are what me and Marvin and our code team look for and is almost a checklist of things for your organization to show us. So it's very important that you ensure cross-match your narrative responses, you know, in your applications with the verifiers listed. So those are the things that Marvin and I definitely have to look for. And if they're not there, we'll have to come back to you and ask you about it. So definitely, yeah, just pay attention to those. If you don't take anything else away from today's webinar, is just definitely 100% sure, check the verifiers. Oh, what happened to my slide here? Oh, there we go. Roles and responsibilities, just a quick explanation of what you can expect or what you should be setting your organization to expect is that ACFID members or potential applicants, your board needs to be aware of all those dot points. And Tamara will send these out, so I won't read everything out. But it's really important that your board members also know what they are agreeing to when you sign up with you know the code of conduct, because and it's okay once you are a member of ACFID, we are really happy, the code team is really happy to run sessions with your board to familiarize them with the code of conduct and the expectations of their role. Same with your staff member, the code of conduct isn't just for your compliance person to tick and do, you know, once a month every year. It is definitely a code of conduct and applies to whole of organization operations. And we want everyone to feel very positive and very proud of being a part of the code of conduct, because then you can be assured that the work that you're doing is meeting a specific standard and trying to be your best. As for ACFID, like Tamara says, we provide learning, we verify your documents, we provide feedback. You can always ask us for help, and we're here to help facilitate relationships. And, you know, we have a whole bunch of learning things and communities of practice for you to network with other members. We also do check emergency appeals. So if, for example, a crisis happens, like, you know, a couple of months ago, the Middle East, Gaza, and Iran and US conflict happens, and you put out an emergency appeal to ask for donations, we do assess those as well for compliance and ensure that, you know, the fundraising tactics that are being used are ethical. And then, you know, lastly, this is what you can expect from the Code of Conduct Committee is decisions on breaches, investigating complaints, and, you know, other compliance issues. Reporting to ACFID. So at the moment, this isn't as important because new applicants have an intake in January and in July, but once you are a member, your reporting will always be 5 months after your financial year end. So if your organization works with the ATO financial year, then your reporting due date is always going to be 30th of November of that same year. If you have an other alternative reporting year, which, you know, some of our organizations do, that's fine. It just means then, you know, usually you'll have to report the following year on the past year. I mean, it's the same as tax reporting. You're not reporting on the current year, you're reporting in the last 12 months. Completing your CSA application. So I've talked about the processes, I've talked a bit about the overview, and I've talked a bit about how to read our documents. But here are some tips to actually completing your application. Like I said, key documents is the QOF, the Code of Conduct online, the Good Practice Toolkit online, and the 2 Learn with ACFID modules that Tamara talked about just before that. We have one module that is just an overview of the Code of Conduct and its commitments. And then we have another module called Completing or something like that, or how to complete your CSA. So definitely go through that as well. We have lots of reporting templates and tools available for you. We don't want to make this hard for you. We appreciate that this process takes a long time and requires a lot of people and resources. So we are trying to make it as easy for you. So jump onto our website. We have reporting templates. We have frequently asked questions. And if you navigate to the Good Practice Toolkit, each commitment, if you scroll down to the bottom, there are template resources, not just from ACFID itself, but we also have examples from our other members. So you can have a look at what other members are doing. And we try to give examples from a wide range of organizations so you can see the difference between a small organization and the expectations from a small organization to our expectations for a large organization. So it's not just one size fits all. ACFID is very aware that we have a huge difference in all our members. CSA requirements, Tamara did go through some of these things, but and again, this will be sent out, so I'm not going to read it, but when we say you must include these documents, we really mean that. Sometimes we have received applications that will say, oh, we don't have this particular policy, but we are writing it and it will be ready in 6 months. Sorry, but that is not an acceptable answer. You can go away and work with your team and develop a policy, and you can develop a draft policy just ready for board approval before. But we do actually need to see a particular policy and have to have that written down in some way before we can proceed with your application. So if you haven't got those policies, then take the time to do to write the policy, because if we can't cite your policies in at least a draft form, it's not acceptable for us to kind of move forward. And then in that last dot point, I've highlighted or bolded audited full financial statements. And if you haven't got that, definitely contact Tamara. But just to note that, you know, particularly in Australia, I think I don't know everywhere else, but in Australia, an auditor is a separate person to your accountant. So they're separate people with separate qualifications. So it's two different types of people. And yes, if your accountant says that they can also do your audit, I would rethink that accountant. So bring back this slide, but just huge reminder, check your answers against the verifiers in the QOF. They're really important. And if you meet, you know, we kind of use it as almost as a bit of a checkbox, you know, for us for what we're checking in your answers. And if you don't discuss it or talk about it in any way, then we do have to come back to you and ask you for more information. Yeah, so last tips and tricks from me, and before I hand over to Marvin, is please utilize the quality assurance framework and the good practice toolkits. We've developed all of these templates and resources for your organizations to apply. So, you know, yeah, and we've got examples there on exactly what we're expecting. Be detail-oriented and descriptive. I think the best way that Marvin and I have explained it is pretend that Marvin and I are new employees of your organization and you are onboarding us into your organization. How would we know what to do? How would we find policies or processes or how to do your operations? If you can explain that to us, that's great. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for how does your organization work and why and how. Use examples too, don't be shy, and definitely tell us all the positive changes and things that you do. Celebrate your organization. You know, it's definitely a milestone to be applying for ACFID membership. And here's a couple of examples. So this is a non-compliant example. It's quite vague and quite general. I know that I'm probably going over time, so I'll just be a bit quicker. I won't read it out loud, but the point is that this particular type of answer is very vague and it's quite general and doesn't really talk too much about the organization itself. So I have another example, which is a compliant one. And when you read it through, it has things like approval of public materials policies, talks about a standardized process. It talks about fundraising policies and guidelines and all the things that they actually do to talk about what they share and how they share things in their newsletters and website and social media. So that's a really great one. And then my third and last example is, this is a super duper excellent 110% meets compliance kind of answer. But you can see that I've highlighted certain things. It's like approval matrix, you know, information is collected by local staff members, talks about consent and how, you know, there's an acknowledgement that sometimes consent is difficult to gain because, you know, there's a bit of a power difference between the organization and the people that you're helping. And talks about the types of training that they go through for ethical story collection, templates around asking people and how to use their stories, and then even talking about how they remove content that's out of date and that they've got a set, you know, particular amount of years to take content out of their rotation. And also, you know, doing things like translations so that everyone can access information. So that's a super duper one. I don't expect that. We don't expect that one, but if you would like to, that'd be great. And last thing is, obviously we are all about artificial intelligence and everybody's really into AI. There is no policy against using AI to complete your organization's CSA, but you can use it to help you, and you can use it to refine your answers, but you still need to send us genuine and truthful answers. They do need to be still quite specific about your organization, and you still need to show us how you're complying with the code of conduct. So any kind of word salads that we get from that are very obviously AI, we will return that back to you without assessing it at all. So best just not to do it. Otherwise, you're wasting your own time and, delays the process as well. So for example, I'll just give a small example is, if you're a small organization and we've asked you about what kind of community consultations that you do, and then AI spits out all and every single type of community consultation and participatory approach that has ever been used ever, and you say that your very small one-person organization is doing all of that, we will have questions. Because even our large organizations don't do all of those and do it well. So a small organization there will be questions. So you can use it. People definitely do use it to kind of support the work and to refine their answers, but still have a person read over your actual answers and be truthful about the things that you do and the things that you don't do in your application. Otherwise, that is a wrap up from me. Sorry, I think I took a bit longer than usual, but I'm going to now hand over to Marvin, who's going to talk about governance and finance.
Thanks, Whitney. Hello, everyone. I hope your brain is not yet too fried. We're trying our best to give all of the tips to you. So hang on. There's more things that we will share to you. And yes, thanks, Whitney. So my name is Marvin. I'm one of the code assessors, and that my role is to review member compliance, specifically on governance and finance. The focus of my presentation will be to highlight and emphasize the usual verifiers under each of the commitment and compliance indicator that we usually require submissions from new members applying. So this does not completely show all verifiers. Yes, and we're going to talk about specifically related to governance and finance. Right. So let's discuss first those that are related to governance, which is under Quality Principle 7 of the Code. The first item here is a straightforward requirement that your constitution or governing instrument should be in your website. And then when we click the link, it should be working. So please ensure that all documents the code requires that should be on your website has the links working. We suggest in your response that you provide the direct link where we can verify it. Sometimes we really had a hard time looking for where you have placed these policies in your website. The second requirement is to have a privacy policy that complies with both the Australian privacy principles and the payment card industry data security standard, or the PCI DSS. Your privacy policy should also be published on your website. I'm emphasizing this because most of the new applicants we reviewed did not include specifically PCI DSS in their privacy policies. They only referenced the Australian privacy principles. PCI DSS applies to any organization that asks for bank card details, especially when you ask for donation, regardless of your size or industry of an organization, and you are also typically contractually bound by your partner banks or payment processors to comply with this standard. More information of this is in our good practice toolkit. For that third item here under commitment 7.3, so hi Whitney. So I'm quickly going to pass this quickly also to you again. Whitney, you're on mute. Yeah.
Thanks. Of course I am. Thanks. Yes, so 7.3, that this is in the list of requirements and documents that I had shown you earlier, but please ensure that you have a complaints handling policy available on your website. It needs to meet all the requirements as described in 7.3. And yeah, they do need to all be easily accessible and available online. Usually a lot of organizations just put up one page where all their policies are available. So that's always yeah, that's easiest for us to assess. Thanks.
Thanks, Whitney. Moving now to the fourth item here under commitment 7.4. These are all related to specific statements required to be in your governance related documents. I broke them down into two, as the first requirement here, as highlighted in green, are statements that we need to see in your governing instrument or constitution, charter, or policy, meaning it does not mean that it should be in your constitution. It can be in your other policies that you have. And then in the second requirement, as highlighted in blue, these statements should be in your constitution, explicitly stated, which the code requires that, for example, frequency of your members' meetings should be at least annually, which is usually your AGM, and the frequency of your board of directors meeting should be at least twice a year. We had instances where the constitution of a member states that the director may decide how often, where, and when they meet, which may appear to comply with the code, but it does not explicitly state that meetings must occur at least annually, as required by the code. So we requested them to amend their constitution. So quickly going back to the first item here as highlighted in green. First one is having a process for induction of new responsible people. We do not need to see the actual copy of this process of yours, as long as we see in your governance-related policy a statement that you have a process for this. That would be okay, especially that this process might be too detailed to be included in your governance policy. For the clear term limits, for example, there should be a statement in your governance policy or constitution that states the maximum term limits for your directors. For the clear number of consecutive terms a responsible person may serve, there should be a statement that clearly shows this. For example, a director can serve up to 3 terms, but can still serve if approved by a special resolution. For the requirement for the majority of the responsible people to be non-executive, we should also see this statement in your governance policy or constitution. So when we say non-executive, a director who does not have a day-to-day role in the management of the company, and they do not hold an executive position such as CEO, CFO, and other senior management roles. I have provided a sample from an ACFID member where you can see how it demonstrated some of the requirements that I mentioned. And as we share the complete details of this requirement are all in the QAF and the ACFID Good Practice Toolkit. Right. Moving now to the next slide, which is those related to Quality Principle 8. Sorry about that. That covers finance and annual report. First one here under Compliance Indicator 8.2.1 is you are required to send us a copy of your financial risk management policy. Organizational-wide policy is fine as long as financial related risks are considered. The second one here, still under CI 8.2.1, is you are required to send us copies of your financial wrongdoing policies. That includes your policy against fraud, corruption, bribery, terrorism financing, money laundering, and violations of sanction imposed by the Australian government. One of the most common resubmission comment we provide for new applicants is they provide us incomplete policy. For example, an applying member has no policies against corruption and bribery, but they do have for fraud. Or we were not able to see the vital features we expect from a financial wrongdoing policy. I will just move to the next slide quickly and come back here just to show you some guidance on the vital features of a financial wrongdoing policy. So here it is. I documented this in detail and have provided also some more notes for you here for your guidance. For letter A here, please make sure you have all of these types of FWD covered in your policy and they have definitions documented. This is important as not all readers understand the different types of FWD. For B, make sure all individuals and organizations who you work with, internal or external to your organization, are covered by the scope of your policy. I also have provided an example from an ACFID member for your further guidance and link again to our good practice toolkit as a resource to help you develop your FWD policy. So it's also in our good practice toolkit. I'll go back to my previous slide. Right. So we are now at the third item here, still at compliance indicator 8.2.1 that requires you to have a policy that addresses checking of individuals and organizations receiving funds against the Australian National Security Listed Terrorist Organizations and the DFAT ASO Consolidated List. This means that we should see in your policy that you do have these processes of checking all individuals and organizations you fund or pay be checked with these listings. So all individuals and organizations not just covers your partners, but all you pay, such as your contractors or suppliers. I have provided an example also here from an ACFID member, how they demonstrate their compliance to this by having that policy. It's here in the bottom part of the slide. Moving now to the next requirement, which is compliance indicator 8.2.4. As Tamara and Whitney mentioned, you should have a full audited financial statements or report that comply with the accounting standards and should have an independent auditor's report that complies with Australian auditing standards. Again, as mentioned by Whitney, I understand that some organizations are exempted to provide audited financial statements with ACNC. But the code has some specific requirements that are more prescriptive. And we also have experience from few of those applicants before that provided a compilation report, which is different from an auditor's report. So please make sure that your accountant or auditor understands this ACFID requirement. The last item here is about new members' lack of confirmation that you have due diligence process to your prospective partners you will fund, and that these three items indicated here are completely included in your process. We have some members sharing that this does not apply to them as they do not fund partners, but we still do encourage them to develop one in case their plans change in the future. So at least you have a ready process for implementation. You can also provide us details of an equivalent due diligence process you conduct when you select new partners, even though you do not plan to fund them. All right. Okay. So moving now to this next slide. On this slide, I'm just highlighting specific compliance indicators and verifiers that does not apply to you yet as member applicants, but will be when you become a member that relates to Quality Principle 8 of the Code. First one is applicants are required to provide their latest annual report as part of your application. However, due to its historical nature, the annual report is not expected to meet all of the requirements outlined in the verifier for CI 8.3.1. At the minimum, your annual report must provide a description of the applicant's most significant aid and development activities undertaken during the reporting period and should be available on your website. For the second item, under commitment 8.2, as you are not yet a member, you are not required to provide ACFID code compliant financial statements. Specifically, we have a required format for income statement that you are not yet required to comply until you become a member. At a minimum, the financial statements must comply with the Australian accounting standards and be accompanied by the independent auditor's report. Okay. Moving now to timeframes and tips and some other FAQs. Before that, is there any questions that you would like to ask for QP7 or 8? Or you want me to continue? Okay, sure. No questions, so I'll just continue. Yeah. So for the time frames, as discussed by Tamara in her earlier slide, we have 18 months in total from the time you have submitted your CSA until your applications are approved by the governance committees of ACFID and the ACFID board. So sorry, is that a question? Oh, all right. Can you turn off? Yeah. Thanks. Yes. So the code team have up to an estimate of 6 months to return initial feedback to new applicants. If there will be delays, we will be communicating that to you. So we are a small and lean team, so this would give us enough time to complete our initial feedback to you. And it's on a first come, first serve basis. Sorry if that sounds like ordering food. Anyway, if your CSA does not have sufficient information or missing policies that we did not see as required by the code, then the code team will ask for a resubmission as our initial feedback. This is where new applicants have the chance to add more information to your responses. Resubmissions may delay or prolong the timeline as we need more time to have this resolved and cleared, and usually provide 3 months for you to clear your resubmission, then another few weeks and months for us to review your resubmission. We had a couple of members having more than one resubmission, so that definitely will push our timeline further. So the key to success is doing your CSA really good at first instance, and so you'll be and of course, our target is just one resubmission. So hopefully we do that, we do it as a target. You can email us though if you have questions when you receive your initial resubmission or feedback, especially if you have questions or additional support that you need, such as review of your policies that we ask you to revise or further clarification in relation to our initial feedback. Once we assess your CSA as compliant, congrats. Your application will now move to the next stage, which will be the approval of various ACFID governance committees. More information of this approval process will be discussed in the next slide. Also, we work with you to meet the deadlines, but there is an expiry date for new applicants. This may mean that you will have to repay and redo the application if you will not be approved by the ACFID governance committees and the ACFID board within 18 months after you have submitted your CSA. There are 2 CSA applications deadline each calendar year for new applications. That's January 30 and July 31. This means that we will commence our CSA review and provide initial feedback only after these dates. So for example, if you submit your CSA at the end of November, it will be included in the January 30 review batch, and our review will begin after that date. You may submit your CSA at any time during the year. However, as mentioned, our review process will only start following the relevant application deadline period. I guess that's it for me. Hopefully, Tamara, those information that I shared are accurate because we closely work with Tamara, our membership engagement advisor, in terms of making sure that you are within the 18-month time limit. So handing over this to you, Tamara.
Thanks, Marvin. Great. Well, I'm going to move to questions shortly, but I just want to kind of come back to the timeframes and the process outlines. Let me just pull that slide back up for you quickly. But yeah, I just want to kind of talk through, we've talked through in a lot of detail about the code self-assessment here. Now you'll note it says 6 to 12 months here for your code self-assessment. That's not a time limit. That's just a recommended amount of time that we think that you should kind of account for when you're preparing for your application. So we don't put a limit on how long it takes you to complete your code self-assessment. We just want to flag early that we do expect it will take between 6 and 12 months to complete that. depending on where you're up to in your kind of process and policy journey. So some organizations, it may take only 3 months, depending on, if they already have lots and lots of documentation and it's really just about reframing their existing policies in terms of our requirements. But for most organizations, we expect it to take longer than that because there's a period of developing new policies or developing new frameworks or really kind of carefully sifting through the code of conduct to align your practices with what our expectations are. Now you'll notice the bit in purple, that's the 18-month time period that we've been talking about. So really what we've put this 18-month time period in place to kind of limit how long is spent on this remedial action period. So we want organizations to be as responsive as possible, to take on board the feedback that our code of conduct team are sharing with you, and to action those pieces of remedial action fairly quickly. Now you are given, about 3 months to action any remedial action that's requested by our code of conduct team, but it's more about we've had organizations in the past that simply just don't respond to us and then years later say, well, I was halfway through the application, why do I need to start again? So that's kind of why that time frame is in place. It's also because as we're collecting lots of documents, particularly, your financial documents, your annual report, we want to make sure that those are in date for the assessment that we're completing. So if it stretches beyond this 18-month time period, we would consider your documents to be out of date and then would want to kind of come back to the beginning. Now, it's unlikely this will happen unless you really don't follow the guidelines and requests from our code of conduct team. If you're really not responsive during this remedial action phase, that's when it might stretch out beyond that 18-month time frame. And sometimes what will happen is if we receive an initial CSA and we think, look, this is going to take more than 18 months, or this is not up to the standards that we'd want to see on a first submission, our code of conduct team might say, look, actually, we don't think you should submit for this time. We think you should go back, take it back. We won't do any assessment at this point. Redo it, and then we'll actually start the assessment at a later date. So that's kind of some of the ways that we might look at your application. Now, some deadlines were mentioned about submission deadlines. You can submit your CSA at any time. So it can happen at any time throughout the year, but we have submission times that we actually review the applications. So because of the workload of our team, we've got, quite a small team here. They're also doing their regular kind of compliance checks with all of our existing members as well. We have timeframes for which we actually assess new applicants, and that is just after the 31st of July each year. So that's coming up soon. And then after the 31st of January the next year as well. So we've really got that time frame just after those dates where our codes team are assessing new applicants. So if you are nervous about stretching beyond that 18-month time frame, we would recommend submitting it kind of closer to those deadlines, but otherwise you can submit it anytime throughout the year. It's just an expectation setting of when our team will actually be able to review those. All right, coming back to the very end of our slides. Just to note on interim status, I have mentioned this before, but once you've been approved by our code of conduct team, by our membership admissions committee, our code of conduct committee, and our ACFID board, then you become an interim member, so you have all membership rights. We'll pop you on our website at that point, although we will note that you're an interim member, and you'll be able to display our logos on your website. All of that will come with your interim status. Again, the only thing that you will not do is vote at the AGM, and you will not pay fees until you're ratified as a full member. Again, AGM ratification, we will update your profile on our website once you're ratified, and then we will start the process of kind of getting your first set of fees, identifying your international disbursements. Marvin will work closely with you on that, and we will issue an invoice at that point. So I guess before I answer any frequently asked questions, I just wanted to check in and see, does anyone have any particular questions, perhaps for those especially who are partway through their application that they wanted to talk through with us today, or if there's anything that's come up during our webinar today that they wanted to address? No, okay. All right. Well, I'll just chat through these very briefly. So what happens when you submit the eligibility form for full membership? I get notified and I will review it. So that sits with me in the membership function. I'll review your application. I'll check that all the documents are there. I'll check that you are eligible. I might come back and say, hey, you're missing this document. Could you please send it to me? And then I'll attach it to your application. Once I'm satisfied that you are eligible, I'll approve it and an invoice will be issued to you for the application fee. So who needs to approve the full member application form? That is your CEO and board chair. So they need to approve your application. It will an email will be triggered to them once you submit your application form, and they'll be asked to just log into our portal and approve it. It's a pretty straightforward process, but do let us know if you have any issues. What happens if your CEO or board chair rejects the full member application form and they wish to amend it? So our preference, a very strong preference, is that they don't actually hit the reject button. If there's concerns, they let us know and we can revert it back to you to be edited. But once you hit reject, really it's quite hard for us to then revert it back to you to make any changes. You'd need to then resubmit the whole application form. It can be a bit of a headache both for you and for us. So if there are concerns with your full application form, if your CEO or your chair feels it doesn't reflect accurately the activities of your organization or there's something that they want to amend, just flick me an email and we can revert it back to you to make those changes. The next question is about the ANCP program with DFAT. So the specific question here is, can we fast track your application so you can apply this year? No, absolutely. We don't have any control over that. And look, whilst we are very happy to try and answer any questions about the ANCP program, we're not in a position to be providing guidance or really give too much I guess, feedback on whether or not you'd be ready to apply. But we do work closely with DFAT. We run ANCP webinars for new applying organisations. We have a community of practice that's specifically for ANC organisations in their program. There is a lot of resources within ACFID for applying for ANCP, but just note that it is independent of ACFID, so that we don't have any control over the application process. We don't have any control over DFAT's assessment of your application. If you are successful with ACFID membership and then you go on to apply for ANCP. That said, if you are thinking of applying for ANCP, we recommend you get in touch with us even before application, just so that we can kind of keep it on our radar that that's something that you're interested in, and also so that we can have early conversations with you about what that might look like, or link you with organizations that are a part of that program or have gone for that program, and they can kind of work with you on or chat to you about what accreditation for ANCP looks like. Can you get assistance with the code self-assessment before you submit? I will let Whitney or Marv answer that one.
I'm happy to answer. Thanks, Tamara, and I'll answer that question in the next one, which is can you review our policies before we submit our CSA? Look, we can provide limited assistance. So if you have any questions or want to know any kind of clarifications around what we expect or what that means, like in practice, when any part of the code means in practice, by all means, please email us. We say limited assistance just because we do have quite a high workload with our existing members already. So, we do need to kind of prioritize some of our assistance at times. Can you review our policies before we submit our CSA? Look, if it's your first time ever writing the policy, you can send us one policy for us to review and kind of let you know, hey, you're definitely on the right track, and these are some things that we would improve on, or absolutely you are not on the right track. Please check this resource out. So you can send us that. Please don't send us a full suite of your policies. We don't have time to read all of that as much as we would like to help you. It's important that, we will probably just redirect you to our existing resources for you to kind of check out yourself and cross-match. So we will help you, and we will review like a policy or two if we're, in a quiet time. So definitely happy to help, but please do note that yeah, we are often assessing our existing members who, you've seen we have 139 of, so that's a lot. And your organization is probably not the only organization also applying for a membership as well. So usually we have about 3 to 4. Once we had 8 apply, in one round. So that's a lot of policies to read through and give feedback to. So we will try to help, but please be reasonable.
Great, thank you.
Tamara.
Thanks, Whit. Yeah, that's a good point. If we will do our absolute best to help you with the application process, and particularly if you have questions around the process or where to find resources, then please reach out to me. I can absolutely support with that. I can direct you to areas in the good practice toolkit, kind of that's where I'm able to support. But if you have any specific kind of technical questions or you need clarification, then yeah, we can direct that to our codes team. But again, being mindful that they do have quite a few assessments to get through at any given time. The last 2 questions relate to kind of how to keep track of your application and how to use the portal. So I'm just going to show you this quickly on your dashboard. So when you log into when you log into the portal, you'll be able to see your applications kind of in the system, and you can have a look and see where you're up to, what if there's any resubmissions due. Whitney and Marv, do you want to perhaps speak a little bit more to how to effectively use your dashboard for a code assessment?
Yeah, sure. So like Tamara says, once you've logged in and found the right spot in your dashboard, this is what you'll see. So the first column that I'm looking at is the status. So this example screenshot that I've got has like a million CSAs in there. Yours won't look like that. Yours will have 1, or if you've done this before, 2. But either way, you'll get a CSA ID, you'll have a compliance contact, you'll have your organization's name, and then on that 4th column, it'll have a status. It'll be in progress or not yet started or ACFID complete. All of those different statuses are listed down at the bottom of that slide. So you'll always know where you are in the queue and what you're doing and where I guess your application sits in the process. But you'll also have in that 6th column is the submission due date. So definitely keep an eye out on that. And we have fixed it to day, month, year, not before we had American dates. So that was very confusing for all of us. And then you'll also see on that last column the financial year that you're reporting on. So whenever you are reporting, just remember the time frame is just the financial year before, like previously. So, when you're reporting on something, if you're referencing something from almost 10 years ago as an example, and you haven't updated that since, perhaps you should do that, please.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I don't think we have time to go through this, and it's not super necessary at the moment if everyone's just starting their first one. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think yeah, at the moment we can close this off. There's just some details here about how to resubmit things. It is all fairly straightforward through the portal, and again, I'll send through all of these slides so you'll be able to see. But yeah, it should be a fairly straightforward process. If you get stuck, just let us know. And we also have lots of guidelines and lots of documents with screenshots on how to find things in the portal as well. So if you're struggling to find something, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm just going to pop to the last slide here so you can see our contact details. So you can see here membership@acfid.asn.au. You'll reach me. Please use me as your first point of call, and I can direct it if it's a code question. But if you know it's a specific question that's for Whitney or Marv or for Julie, please flick it through there. But yeah, if have any general questions about membership or about the process, just let me know, and I can hop on a call with you at kind of any point in your application process as well. So do just let me know if you need anything as well. I think we're going to close it off there just to give you back, whole 9 minutes of your afternoon. Thank you so much for staying with us for so long and for sitting through. I know it's quite a dense session. If you, again, questions or concerns, let us know. Otherwise, we have lots of resources online, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.